This week on London Real, we have fitness coach and physical educator, Steve Maxwell.
The difference between a coward and, let's say, a hero is what you do with that fear. When you think about all the things that you are grateful for and all the things that you can do, you have a tendency to attract more of same. I've trained a lot of people, and I know a good athlete when I see it. I've seen people in their 80s that are younger than some people in their 20s. I love wrestling, but it's pretty much like checkers.
Okay.
Jiu-Jitsu is like chess. So my wife throws me out, I move into a small house, and I'm feeling pretty depressed and down. I want to feel what I own. I want to have the weight of my material possessions on my body. When you concentrate on what it is that you don't want, you tend to attract more of same.
London Real presents Steve Maxwell, Ageless.
If you go in a closed room and you close the door, the jiu-jitsu guy is going to be the one that comes walking back out.
And I am back in London. The 2 weeks in Barcelona was fun, but now it's over. I'm back to the homies, the Brits, and it's sunny out, so I can't complain. I'm back in Shoreditch. We're back on the ball with all sorts of fantastic guests on London Real, and I want to tell you a little bit about Mr. Steve Maxwell, who is with us this week, who is 61 years old and as fit as a butcher's dog, as they say here in England. It's a term. And you know, for guys like me in their 40s, Steve is like our version of a superhero. I don't know what movies you guys are watching, like Transformers and stuff like that, but when we see a guy like Steve, he's just amazing to us. Because you know, when you get into your 40s, things don't always work as well as they should. Even though I almost got my first bar muscle up today, so I'm obviously the exception to the rule. But Steve is just so inspiring. You know, he's been there, done that. Not only does he personally train Joe Rogan from the UFC, but he also was the first black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under Gracie. This guy was hanging out with the Gracies before the UFC. I mean, just to sit there and listen to Steve is like listening to living history. And on top of that, he's got just a fascinating background in wrestling, in teaching jiu-jitsu, and now he literally travels the world with no residence and just the possessions that he has on his back. And that's one of his rules, is he doesn't allow carry bags with wheels on them because he thinks you should be able to hold everything on your back that you own. So, you know, you could probably do about 4 different episodes for Steve Maxwell, down to his diet. He's really big into separating food groups and having, say, carbs in one meal, protein in the other, vegetables in the other. And you know, let's face it, Steve's about longevity and long-term planning and training. And I was a little giddy because he hung out with the Barstarzz guys in New York. And as you can see today, I just posted, you know, my first bar muscle up, and I'm just pretty much inspired by Steve. So it was a fantastic, you know, hour and a half of talking to Steve about his thoughts and training. And he's very old school, you know, he's very body weight, he's very do functional exercises. He also has some theories which are interesting. He thinks that, you know, certain explosive movements like snatches don't translate over into MMA, and this is something we've been hearing quite the opposite for some time, and it's nice to have a different perspective. So I hope you enjoy Steve. I think you're going to really like him. He's got a great personality, and I think now he's in Hawaii, so he really moves around the world giving these seminars to people. And yeah, we were just really lucky to have him. So I hope you enjoy the show. And he actually made me think a little bit more about my own training and you know, longevity training. Something Mike Dolce mentioned to me as well, is that that's one of his main focuses with clients. And it's also the focus of one of our partners, which are the guys at Monkey Nutrition. And these guys are less about let's pack on as much muscle as soon as possible, and they're more about let's train for longevity, let's train for the long term, and thinking about that way. And I'm starting to think that's more important. You know, I used to be the guy that had the 2 grams of protein, you know, per pound, or, you know, all the stuff that we used to do, and now I just think that's less necessary. And this is one of the reasons reasons that for their Primal 26 protein powder, they recommend just 1 scoop, to assimilate that into your body and not to try to overdose, not to try to oversell. So please check out those guys at Monkey Nutrition. You can click on the link below. Also on our blog section, they've got their brutal workouts with videos. So keep an eye out for those. And also, we're going to be doing some giveaways next month with one of their ebooks. So keep an eye out for that. And also, we're going to have a special London Real code so you guys can get a discount on their products. So keep an eye out for that in the next couple weeks. And much love to what they're doing. I'm getting back in the groove here with Shoreditch, and I kind of missed the place a little bit, as much as I did love the beaches and the art of Barcelona. But have you been to our website recently? It's londonreal.tv, and it's brought to you by the folks at Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform that helps you build your website or e-commerce business or whatever in just simple steps, and you can give it a trial or design it without even giving your credit card. And then if you want to go ahead and buy, you get 10% off with the code London. And I always say, online, you get one chance to make a first impression. And whenever I meet anyone or consider them as a guest, I check out their website. And if it's not money in the bank, it's 2014, kids, your website has to be dope. Then I kind of move on. So get yourself sorted, go to Squarespace and check our website out. It's londonreal.tv. And also, if you want to get a look at one of these beautiful shirts I'm wearing, we got the London Real t-shirts brought to you by the guys at Char Grilled Tees. You can click on our site on gear, order one, support the show, tell your friends what you're doing in your spare time, which is listening to fascinating, interesting people on our show, and also tweet me a picture of you wearing the shirt, and I'll retweet you, post it on Facebook, and maybe tweet me from any location you're in, UK, US, Australia, China. We'd love to hear where you guys are at. And I appreciate the support when it comes to that. I can't wait to see London Real Tees all over this crazy town. And there you go. Just finally, I wanted to give a big thanks to the guys who get me started in the morning. And those are the folks at Bulletproof. These guys are blowing things up big time. They've got a new book coming out at the end of the year that you can pre-order right now by clicking on the link below. And if you pre-order, you get 5 free videos that they're going to email to you. And I'm a big fan of Dave Asprey. This is the Bulletproof Diet. So on top of the coffee that you have every morning, it's all about his diet techniques, which is just a fascinating way to eat, and one that I follow anyways, mostly without even knowing it. And I want to get even more of the details. But Dave has a lot of things that he's kind of avoided because of a lot of his tolerances, and some things that he's gone forward to, which is a big consumption of fats in your diet. And you're going to learn more about it. The book's coming out, I believe, in December, but like I said, you can pre-order now and get the free videos. So check that out. Big fans of what those guys are doing and their whole ethos when it comes to nutrition. And that's it, rounding up here, going to Hoxton Square here in Shoreditch. And I think this is the first day since I've been back from Spain where I'm feeling normal again. So big love to that. If you know people that are coming through London in September and you want to see them on the show, guys like Steve Maxwell, guys like Ido Portal, guys like Peter Joseph from the Zeitgeist Movement, hook me up, send me an email at brian@londonreal.tv, tweet to me, just get at me and suggest who they are. Sometimes I don't know who's coming through, and you might know. We're always open-minded to what's going on and people that we can have on the show. So please do me that. And that's it. I'm about to shoot an episode of our show Silicon Reel, so check that out. We stream it live every Friday at 5 o'clock, and you can go to siliconreel.com, get on the mailing list for that too. And finally, if you watch this show, you can get it free on iTunes on audio. So you can just click on this link below and go straight to iTunes and sign up. And it's free, and you can always have the audio version there in case you're like on the tube or on the treadmill or whatever. You can't watch our funny looking faces. And there you go. Now I'm going to leave you with physical educator and fitness coach, Mr. Steve Maxwell. Let's do this. Okay, here we go. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Mr. Steve Maxwell, who is an American fitness coach, physical educator, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and instructor. You've been named one of the top 100 trainers in the U.S. by Men's Journal, and were the first man to teach kettlebell classes in the United States. That's an amazing thing just there. We will get to that. You are 61 years old, and you can hang with the guys at the Barstarzz. I watched that video recently. That's impressive. I've been working on my muscle up lately. We'll talk more about that later. You personally train Joe Rogan, which gives you massive amounts of street cred. Steve, welcome to London Real.
Hey, well, thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on the show.
No, it's great to have you here. I was wondering what you think of London. If we could just get that out of the way. I don't know if we're known as a fitness global destination, but I always think of us Londoners as not necessarily being as fit as, say, the guys in LA or the guys in Australia. But I also know there is, a real desire for fitness here. So I'm curious what you think when you're back in the States, when you think of London, and then what it's been like since you've been here.
I first came to London, I think it was 1981.
Wow.
And I thought it was a fantastic city. I mean, it's one of the great cities of the world.
Okay.
I mean, anyone that enjoys travel definitely needs to come here at least one time to see it. Just the culture is fantastic. And of course it had, the UK had such a major impact on the Americas and the United States. And yeah, I mean, it reminded me very much, the architecture and so forth, of my hometown, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Right.
Very similar. It was the Quakers that left the UK and set up shop in Pennsylvania and founded Philadelphia. So it was founded by English people.
Right.
And I just felt immediately at home here.
Was there a fitness industry in '81 here? Were there people training?
At that time, I was the personal trainer for a very wealthy man who just took me around on his vacations and so forth.
Okay.
And that was like the dream vacation. We flew the Concorde SST over from JFK. He put me up, fabulous. We stayed at the Connaught Hotel,
Connaught, yeah, I've heard
in
of
Mayfair,
it.
real fancy. Like you have to wear a coat and jacket
For dinner.
just to go inside. They made us use the servants' entrance to go out and run in Hyde Park,
Because you were in training.
Yeah, you couldn't even be in the place with trainers or anything like that. And we took that famous rail ride up to Fort William from London to Glasgow, the overnighter.
Okay, right, yeah.
And then we took that very famous train ride. It's supposed to be one of the 10 greatest train rides in the world. And came back to London. And then we flew to the Mediterranean and did a sailing tour of the French Riviera. Now, can you imagine a man that paid for 6 of his relatives plus his trainer on the Concorde SST? Can you imagine the kind of money this guy was making? And so, I was just busy training him the whole time, but I had a lot of free time, and I got a chance to walk around London, and I said, wow, I could really live in this city.
Do you think you could live in this city?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's everything I like about a city.
Which is what?
It's easy to get around.
Okay.
I love going to movies, and just within walking distance of the hotel where I'm at, there must be 12 movie theaters. It's easy to get good food. Londoners are very conscious about good eating and good food. So there's plenty of fresh, organic foods at almost every corner. It's hard not to eat well here.
Yeah, it's you wouldn't think of it right away, but since we have so much rainfall, apparently there's just a massive amount of local selection when it comes to produce and things like that from London. Then of course we got France right across the channel, so we're influenced heavily by European cooking. It's interesting when you go back to the States. Even portion sizes here are very continental. Where you just kind of get a small starter and a small portion, and it's when I go back to the States, I'm always like, whoa, I didn't remember ordering a whole plate full of French fries and all these things.
Supersize me.
Yeah, it's weird. And I wouldn't say there's a lot of obese people here. I'm curious what you think, but it's definitely more of a continental feel where I think it's all about mindset and consumption, and we can talk about this later too. I think in the UK, it's not, you aren't as big as your food. Food is just kind of something that's kind of eaten and enjoyed, but not to a glutton standpoint,
Well, I like the green consciousness of the UK.
Okay.
And they're very green here, and I love all those really cool little folding bikes everyone's riding around, the little Bromptons.
Yeah.
Believe me, if I lived here, I'd definitely have one of those little bikes.
Because you can take those on the tube as well.
Smartest idea ever. So you're completely independent. You don't need to drive a car. And as far as fitness and so forth, I see plenty of fit people.
Okay.
There's a shocking high number of very good-looking women in London, I noticed.
There you go.
Very shapely girls, very pretty. And, I always thought of New York as being the real melting pot in the world. I would say it'd have to be London. I have never seen such a diverse amount of different cultures and people from all over the world, all walks of life. I had a haircut from an Albanian barber. I never met anyone from Albania before, but what are the odds,
Yeah.
And I mean, everywhere I go, there's people from Romania, from Russia, from Croatia, lots of people from France and so forth. But you'll hear snatches of conversation in just about every tongue, on the planet.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
I like that.
Yeah, you can walk down Knightsbridge, you can hear 20 languages, you can meet someone from Turkey, from China, from Russia, from South Africa. I mean, it's just, and they're all just here, just like you're here. That's why I never really feel like a foreigner here, because I'm just like, everybody's a foreigner.
Everyone's a foreigner.
And it's funny, if you ask even English people, you go back 100 years and they'll be like, oh yeah, well, my grandpa is a Russian Jew who got pushed over here, he came from Poland, or this guy came from this, and they kind of, you would think they were kind of like an advertisement for Wimbledon until they tell you their history, and it's just a big melting pot. Even the royal family, the House of Windsor, is from all over the continent.
And every place has a vibration, like a vibe, and the vibe here is really good. It feels like something's happening. It's kind of an exciting kind of feeling.
Interesting.
I get the same thing in New York, but it's almost too much.
Right.
It's almost overwhelming. After a few days, it's like, whoa, you start to suffer from nervous system exhaustion. Here, it's a little bit different. It always just feels like a sort of excitement in there, but it's not overly so. So yeah, I think this is a wonderful place. Plenty of fit people walking around. There's plenty of good-looking guys and gals. It's obvious that they take care of themselves. So yeah, it's very easy to live here.
I must say that I always think fitness is a little bit lacking here. As far as the typical English mind frame is, it rains, we go to the pub, and we eat some fish and chips. So like, we're starting from a baseline of that, as opposed to, say, in San Diego, we were talking about where people are outside, like Sydney, Australia, where there's obviously more of a fitness lifestyle because it's warm. But I think as London's changing and it's becoming international, it's already an international city, and I think people are kind of catching up to the training piece. But you're right, there's women from all over the world here. So it's a great place. I want to hear about you. I know you don't live anywhere, and I've been told you keep all your possessions in a single bag that you won't even put wheels on, and that limits you from keeping your possessions. Before we get into the training stuff, can you tell me a bit about that?
For sure. Well, it wasn't always that way.
Okay.
I had a gym, 2-story gym, personal training gym, and the very first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu academy on the Eastern Seaboard.
What year is this?
This was 1990.
1990.
Yeah, that was very early.
That is early. You were the first black belt, American black belt of House and Gracie, is that right?
From House and Gracie. And I don't know what the hierarchy was, but I know I had to have been in the first 10, maybe 20. Certainly from the Gracies, I was one of the very first. I think the Machado brothers had given out a bunch of belts early.
I'm thinking of guys way back. I mean, like John Danaher from Henzo Gracie's, and Matt Serra probably got their black belt in the early 90s or late 80s from Henzo.
I think it was almost around, maybe a little after even myself.
Oh, really? Okay,
yeah,
right.
I was pretty early.
Because you were early on.
Yeah,
and that's back in the day when nobody had heard, Jiu-Jitsu was not a household.
You said Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and people said, but I thought Jiu-Jitsu was Japanese.
Yeah.
You say, no, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and they just like look at you like,
total blank. Right?
What are you talking about, Brazilian? Right. You mean that dancing stuff, right? Like capoeira.
Yeah, right.
They just didn't get it.
Right.
But boy, that first early UFC. But back to the traveling.
Yeah.
So I was quite a collector. I amassed a certain degree of material things. A big 4-story brownstone house,
This is in Philly.
The garage, right in
so you had your gym.
Center City, Philadelphia. So I had the gym, the house, the 2 kids, the rich man's family, as they call it.
Because it's not too big, or what? Is that the rich man's family?
Yeah, like one boy and one girl, It's supposed to be like the ideal and so forth. Then in many ways it was the ideal. But, working with your significant other and running a business and then living, it can put a lot of stress.
I don't know how anyone can do it.
It's hard. And we definitely grew apart, and, divorce does things to one's life. Certainly was rather traumatic at the time. I can see now is probably the best thing that ever happened to me,
right.
And I had just lost my incentive to be a gym owner. There had been some renovations to our building, and we had to temporarily clear the building. So the business was kind of temporarily moved to another site. It was a lot of stress.
And that's hard. That's hard to do with a community.
It's hard to do with a community. I actually had to move my jiu-jitsu school and personal training business 3 blocks over while they renovated the building. And then the idea was to move it back and all that equipment. And oh my God, it was a nightmare.
So how many years was your jiu-jitsu academy there?
I ran Maxwell for a better part of 17 years.
Wow, that is a long time.
A pretty long time.
You started in 1990? No, you got your black belt in 1990.
I actually opened Maxwell in January of 1990. I had actually had my first Gracie seminar in 1989.
Okay.
And I had just been practicing with some ex-wrestler friends of mine. And then I started in earnest setting up mats and training. At that time, of course, I had no business actually teaching. I was only a blue belt myself.
Okay.
But, there was no one else.
Right.
And what are you going to do? And I had a judo school next door and a Aikido school next door. I had been a wrestler for many, many years, all through junior high school, wrestled Division I NCAA. So I had a pretty decent grappling background. So I called up my old buddies and said, hey, come on over. I want to show this really newfangled jiu-jitsu style. I think you really like it.
And they said you must be crazy. I find it very hard to believe that you as a wrestler would even embrace jiu-jitsu, because there's a lot, especially back then, before anyone could see the practical uses in the UFC. I mean, why did you embrace it?
Well, I went to that first seminar in 1989. It was Royler, Royce, and Rorion.
Okay.
And
where was this?
This was at Hunter College in New York City. Very first Gracie
Jiu-Jitsu.
Jiu-Jitsu.
Pre-UFC, of course. Right?
This is way pre-UFC. You know, this is like 3.5 years before UFC.
Okay, so it's Rorion and Royler and
Royce and Hickson.
Jesus.
And I was just so impressed.
Were they impressive dudes back then?
I went and sparred with Royler, and I was just utterly shocked that this little skinny Brazilian guy,
tiny,
could handle me.
Was he 60 kilos at the time or something? Or?
Probably. I mean, he was tiny. I wasn't that much. I wasn't that big myself.
Okay.
Maybe 70 kilos at the time. I was pretty small.
Okay.
But I mean, it was just shocked that I had no trouble taking these guys down because I had a real good wrestling pedigree. No problem putting someone on the ground. But what do you do with them? It's like a tiger with the tail. You don't want to let go because it's now what do I do?
Right.
I was just shocked.
Did you remember how it felt getting into submission, the armbar, and the chokes? I mean, had you felt anything like that in wrestling before?
Yeah, but more accidental because, that's definitely against the rules, those types of chokes.
Matt Hughes always says he had a few tricks. Like Matt Hughes kind of had the head and arm choke that he would pull when the ref wasn't looking. I know you wrestlers had a few submission
Well, yeah, for
tricks.
sure.
Okay.
You definitely had your dirty little tricks.
Pain points.
Right.
But they weren't like a rear naked choke.
No. Yeah, it's not like the guy could tap out or anything.
Right.
And if you passed the guy out, there was definitely going to be an investigation why the guy passed out, and so.
Can't do that.
Yeah, you got to be careful. And I was always a pretty clean athlete. I wanted to win according to the rules. I always had that type of mentality of doing things by the rules.
Okay.
I mean, if I agreed to follow a set of rules, then I did.
Okay. So you met those guys at the seminar. Had Hickson even gone to Japan to fight yet, or
no? That was all well before all that stuff.
Okay, and
they were all one big happy family. They're all teaching at the Gracie Academy. And actually, they were still teaching out of the garage at that time.
Okay, the garage.
Horion's garage in Torrance, California.
Is that the one featured in Choke, the documentary with Hickson, or maybe?
That was his garage.
That was Hickson's garage.
That he had set up.
Right. Okay.
He had his own house and so forth.
Okay.
So it was really interesting. So I totally fell in love with jiu-jitsu. But I didn't really answer your question how I became a nomad.
Yeah. No, back to that.
Guy.
So you had the.
So my wife throws me out.
Right.
I move into a small house, and I'm feeling pretty depressed and down. Okay. I feel like I'm just letting life pass. It's really cool to own a jiu-jitsu school and a gym, but you really are trapped.
Right.
You can't go anywhere. You can't do anything. So I'd always wanted to travel, and I had a Major League Baseball player approach me that had worked with me before and offered me to come out and be his own personal conditioning coach in Arizona.
Okay.
And one of the conditions of employment, I had always wanted to live in a camper van. I always wanted to live in an RV and just drive around.
But you never had before.
I never had.
Okay.
You couldn't do it when you own a jiu-jitsu school, and you have a family and kids and all this stuff.
Right.
So I went out to Arizona. I worked for this guy's name was David Bell. He used to play for the Phillies and the San Francisco Giants. And those guys make a lot of money, a lot of money. They have 164 games per year, and they're all subsidized by television advertising. So there's millions of dollars in baseball. Okay. Even though I find it somewhat a boring sport, it's still pretty popular.
Watch cricket if you want to really have a snooze.
So I moved in this van, and I worked with this guy, and then when my contract was up, he left me buy the van from him at a really good rate, and I lived in that van for almost 5 years.
And this is 10 years ago, 8 years ago.
It was just a converted Mercedes work van that had been converted by Westphalia.
Okay.
And I lived in that van for 5 years, and I drove from East Coast to West Coast of the United States 8 times.
8 times.
Completely across the U.S.
Okay.
All different routes, just camping out.
This is throughout the 2000s, kind of. Okay.
This is from between 2005 and let's say 2010.
Okay. So Donald Cerrone's fighting this weekend at a UFC event, and he drives his campers all over the place. And he's like, he hates to be in the hotels in Vegas. He just wants to be outside. He wants to be in his camper.
It's a fantastic way to live. I love that gypsy nomadic. It was just so freeing, and just having your little house on wheels. Okay. And it was amazing how much stuff you can accumulate in a little van like that,
All right.
But once I started the seminar circuit, I found, information is worth money. Information is money. It's valuable. And I had a lot of information about training and conditioning and so forth. And when I realized that, and I started getting out on the seminar circuit on my own, what do you do with the van? You can't just leave it someplace. Right. You can't leave it in long-term parking at an airport. You can put it in storage. But what was happening was, one seminar would seg into the next one, and you would have this whole string. In the beginning, I would go to a seminar, come back to the van. Okay. Fly to a seminar, get back to the van. But then they started compiling, because, I'm in Germany now, in Dusseldorf, well, why not go to Cologne? Because someone wants me there. I just got contacted from a guy in Munich, he wants me there. You see, it kept building up to the point where I just had to sell the van. Okay. And then I just scaled everything down because it's a real hassle to bring a lot of stuff when you travel as much as I do. Right. And I found that, you know what? I don't need anything. I just have one bag, 65 liters. It's not that big, It's like about that wide, about that high, and it converts into a backpack. Okay. I hate those dorky wheeled things. Right. Try going over cobblestones or walk through the snow while dragging one of those silly bags.
So you carry your bag like a man.
I want to feel what I own. I want to have the weight of my material possessions on my body. Okay. And if it feels too heavy, it means I have just too much crap. I just got to, divest myself and scale it down even more. Okay. Because, what do you really need in this life, You can only sit at one chair at a time. You can only drink from one cup at a time. You only can wear one pair of trousers and one shirt at a time. So, you need a change or two of clothes, but you don't need that much. And right. I usually try to go to warm climates as much as possible, so I don't have to have a lot of bulky winter stuff.
And these days, everything's digital, so all your information, all your books, all your music can be in the cloud.
I even pay the Internal Revenue Service my taxes every year online.
Online.
Believe me, Uncle Sam gets his. Even though I spend most of the time abroad, you still got to pay your taxes.
And what does this do to you mentally, like not having to go back to a home? Or we were talking earlier about going back home as if you're kind of going backwards, not forwards. Does it make you kind of relish where you are at all times and looking forward to the next adventure? Because you're not kind of going back to a reset mode when you go home? Or?
It's like be here now.
Right.
I'm not looking to the future. I'm not looking to the past. I'm just enjoying the present moment, talking to you right now. It's kind of cool, and this really nifty little studio that you set up. Right. And I'm having a blast. And, what's going to be happening in 2 hours from now, it doesn't even cross my mind. So I don't plan for the future. Right. And I don't hold on to the past. And I don't know what's going to happen, but I have tremendous faith in a higher power. And that power leads me to do the right thing at the right time, to be in the right place at the right time. And I don't believe a person dies 1 second before they're supposed to die. I don't believe in luck. I think you make your own luck with just the way you think about things. Everything that happens with exactly the way it should and when it should. No sense crying about it. I think the universe runs with a mathematical precision. So, sometimes seemingly unexplainably horrible things happen, seemingly to innocent people. But, if you look at karma, past lives, things like this, it all makes sense.
It's been said that nothing's good or bad, but thinking it makes it so.
Pretty much.
You know, I've heard that before. So yeah, I am in agreement with about that. Talk to me about this jiu-jitsu studio. I mean, for most guys in jiu-jitsu and black belts, that's the dream. One day, that's not even the dream. That's like the only course of action sometimes, is to open up that studio. So, you know, how was it with you? Like, you taught for many years, but is it a big responsibility that not everyone's going to be ready for?
Well, it is a big responsibility, especially if you're dealing with younger people and children and so forth. It's huge. I started out life as a physical education teacher. I graduated from the School of Health and Physical Education at Westchester State University and went right into public teaching after my NCAA wrestling career was over.
Okay.
And I continued to coach wrestling for a couple years. And still wrestled at the amateur level, open tournaments and so forth. But it's pretty much a young man's game. It's pretty hard to, when you're a working man with a real job, it's kind of hard to keep up with that game.
Put the hours into practice.
Yeah, put the hours into practice.
And is it pretty injury-ridden as you get older?
Oh, yeah, absolutely injury-ridden. I had way more injuries in wrestling than I ever did in jiu-jitsu.
Because these guys practice 2-3 hours a day, 5 days a week.
But they go hard. Everything's like on-off, either 100 miles per hour or nothing at all. And I was always looking for that activity to replace my beloved wrestling. I tried many things. I tried Muay Thai, tried boxing, different styles of karate, even tried Kung Fu. And, I just basically was a natural grappler.
Okay.
I didn't like striking. I didn't like being hit. I like clinching. I like wrestling. I like grabbing.
It's a different kind of energy too.
It's a different kind of energy. You can wrestle with a guy pretty much all out, full bore with all your might, and no one gets hurt.
Yeah.
But damn, man, when you're punching someone in the side of the head or kicking somebody in the legs, someone's getting hurt.
Yeah, and you always somebody has to hold back a little bit. Unless you're in a pro bout. Someone's holding back and someone's being concerned and someone's wearing the headgear and someone can get hurt, and it's a weird thing. It's a round, there's a break. It's a different kind of energy, and you're striking someone, you're not touching. I don't know, it's a really weird.
Not to mention the cumulative brain trauma.
Right.
And, I've worked with many guys in their 40s that did years of Muay Thai or kickboxing. Generally speaking, these guys are just ravaged with injuries and riddled with knee, hip, lower back. So it's something you may even want to think about yourself. I know you do the Muay Thai. Be very careful. You're basically swinging your leg like a baseball bat, and it really wasn't designed for that. Right. So
guys that did sparring in their 20s,
you're going to get some serious trauma as you get older.
Yeah.
So
I didn't start till I was 32, and I only sparred with a few guys, so I never went. I think if I started in my 20s, I might have gone overboard with it. But yeah, injury-wise.
Well, working the bags was a lot of fun, and training. As if you were training as a Muay Thai fighter. In other words, hitting the bags and the focus mitts and skipping rope and doing a lot of the fight type exercises, that can be a lot of fun.
Right.
And not so bad. Shadow boxing is a fantastic drill,
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people don't want to take up boxing because they're like, I don't want to get hit. And I'm like, 98% of boxing is not sparring. It's just the conditioning, the shadow work, all that stuff.
So, yeah, that can be really a lot of fun.
Okay, so you transitioned from wrestling to jiu-jitsu as far as a kind of a grappling passion. And you embraced that and you taught it. You built up a school. And I guess you have a lot of commitments to the young people. You can't just close your doors.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's how you pay your bills in the jiu-jitsu world,
Right.
It's the kids programs that keeps the lights on.
Okay.
You don't make a lot of money in that particular game, but it's very satisfying.
Okay.
The majority of my money, what really kept my business alive was my personal training. I had my list of people that trained at my school was called Maxwell. It was like the who's who of the Philadelphia area. There was some pretty posh folks that paid for personal training at my facility, so that was kind of neat.
Right.
A lot of perks.
Yeah, same at Hodger Gracie's here in London. Back 10 years ago, there was no other game in town, and Hodger had such a high level, and you'd see Guy Ritchie there, and no one would know who they are, but it was kind of like all these top guys in their A-level jobs would come over there and get the privates and that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what keeps you going. Your VIP clients and of course children, kids programs.
Right.
And yeah. It's definitely a tough profession in that it takes a lot out of you to do.
Physically.
And if you are prepping for a fight, let's say you're a pro-level fighter, it's virtually impossible for you to teach and train for a fight. I can so easily see why these guys will just basically take off and put their, some trusted students teaching all the classes, because you just can't do it. It just takes too much energy.
Right.
It takes too much out of you.
What do you, you got to watch the whole UFC evolve, and you got to see, jiu-jitsu first kind of take over the UFC, and then now, there's so many other arts involved. What was your thoughts as you watched that
well,
happen?
I was an original investor in the UFC.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yes. Jorge and Gracie came up with this brainchild of showcasing jiu-jitsu.
Right.
He was pretty confident that jiu-jitsu could beat any other martial arts style. There was a saying that 1 year to beat all other martial arts styles, the rest of your life to beat jiu-jitsu. Jorge was under the it was his opinion, and it was pretty much backed up with fact, that if a guy didn't know jiu-jitsu, he didn't know how to fight.
Okay.
That if you're fighting mano a mano, we're not talking about like multiple attackers. I'm talking about one guy versus one guy, and the guy who knows nothing about ground fighting or jiu-jitsu, he's pretty much going to get choked out.
Right, which we saw in the UFC.
Like 93, 94% of the time. There's always that off chance that maybe he could get knocked out, but it's really hard, really, really hard. And the Gracies have proven that in Brazil for many years.
Right, because they would fight anyone on the beaches.
Anyone.
But Rickson had, 300, 400 street fights? Is that probably accurate from what you know about the information?
Well, I wouldn't doubt it, for sure. The guy is an amazing guy, and if you've ever rolled with him, everything they say about him is absolutely true.
You've rolled with him?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay.
It's like, whoa. And I've had the honor of rolling with his son, Kron, who is a lot of fun to train with. Because, see, these guys are so good, they can scale the game down and allow you to get your movements in, so that you're not just feeling overwhelmed or crushed. Right. They're allowing you to actually enjoy the game, and they'll bring their game down to your level.
But that's what makes it good.
Which really makes it fun for you. You don't feel like you're being smashed. And when they get bored, then they'll just catch you in a choke or something.
I've had it both ways. I've trained with black belts sometimes, and they crush me in like 8 seconds, and I'm like, I know you can do that, but I kind of came here to learn something. And then some guys, they scale it down.
Well, it just depends too. Maybe the guy's just training for his own self. He's conditioning himself. Sure. Maybe there was something about you that peeved the guy a little bit. That you're maybe unaware of. Maybe you're a little bit too rambunctious, or
that's something
and you didn't even know you were doing it, but the guy was just making a point.
So you roll with Rickson. I heard from people that had watched Rickson and Renzo roll back in the day. Maybe it was Danaher or someone. They just said Rickson really was a level above everyone.
Total level above. But the Gracies didn't invent the concept of the UFC. That goes way back.
Okay.
There was a guy by the name of Eisai Maeda. He was from the Kodokan Judo School. He had been handpicked by Jigoro Kano to go spread the word of Judo. Right. Judo at that time was almost synonymous with Jiu-Jitsu. And what Jigoro Kano did was he organized a whole bunch of various Jiu-Jitsu schools into one federation. And then they took the best techniques from all of them. However, Kano did not particularly like ground fighting. So he kind of minimized ground fighting in the curriculum at the Kodokan. But Maeda, he had been a ground fighting specialist as well as having devastating throws. And he went to France and Spain. He took a stage name by the name of Conde Coma. And there he used to take fights in Europe for money.
Right.
And that was considered un-Buddha-like by Kano, and he was thrown out of the Kodokan. So it didn't daunt Eisai Maeda. He went to England. He was here in the UK. He actually won several wrestling tournaments, even though he had never wrestled, and he was outweighed by about almost 40 to 80 pounds in some cases.
When would he have been here? What year would that have been?
That would have been in the very early 1900s.
Okay.
And then he went on to America, and there was President Theodore Roosevelt, it was about that era, was very fascinated with judo and jiu-jitsu.
Really?
And he studied and trained jiu-jitsu. And one of his bodyguards was a former Annapolis wrestler who embarrassed one of the Japanese guys in front of the president during an exhibition. So Kano got some, this Conde Koma,
Right.
Asa Maeda, got some Japanese businessmen to put some money up, and he went and he thrashed that guy, and kind of got payback, to regain the honor of the Japanese.
Okay.
And I always wondered whether this was just legend or whether it was true. I actually had the nephew of that man that was his great uncle, who was the bodyguard for President Theodore Roosevelt. He actually wrote me and said, yeah, my uncle used to talk about how he got totally manhandled by a little Japanese guy. And I says, damn, that is for real, man. So Maeda went down through Mexico, went to Cuba, all through Central America. He used to put on exhibitions at the mining camps, and where the guys had nothing to do,
right,
and lots of money. And he would gladly take the money by getting people to place bets on the fights. Sometimes he would almost throw a fight. He'd have ringers and make it look like he wasn't any good. And then everyone would bet on the other guy. And then, of course, he'd kick the guy's ass, and they had to get out of town quick because the guys realized, hey, we've been had, man. This guy, he was holding back those first couple of fights. Okay. And he ended up in Brazil, where he taught the Gracie family.
Right, okay.
And that's where they got their...
And that was in the 30s or 20s still.
Yeah, this was like in the 30s. And then one of the things, the elder Gracie, Gaston Gracie, actually helped him start a Japanese immigration colony. This is fueling pre-war Japan. Right. They needed the natural raw resources from Brazil because being a little island nation, they needed to pretty much import everything.
Right. They still do, yeah.
And they still do. So this guy was really devastating. I asked Elio Gracie. He wasn't taught by him directly, but this guy taught Carlos Gracie, who opened up the first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school.
Right. Elio's brother.
Elio's older brother.
Older brother, right.
So he was really the true founder of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Okay.
And but Elio was the one that seemed to have the highest skill level and the real knack for it, even though he's rather small and weak.
Small guy, right.
He was able. What he did was he changed the Japanese techniques because he was too small and weak to make many of these things work. And he made it a little bit more user-friendly. But more importantly was he created a teaching style, a way that jiu-jitsu should be taught. So Gracie Jiu-Jitsu is no different from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as far as the holds, the throws, the techniques. The difference between Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is the teaching style and technique. And a person can't really claim to teach Gracie Jiu-Jitsu unless they've been trained directly by the sons of Elio Gracie.
Okay.
The man that founded this whole teaching system.
If you had to describe that teaching technique in a few sentences, what would it be, or the difference in that technique?
Well, it's very interesting because, as a physical education major, who later got his master's degree in exercise science and physical education,
this is what you do.
These guys did not have any formal college or education as far as physical education is concerned, but they were brilliant. They followed all the rules of motor learning, the way the techniques are introduced, the way you do not overwhelm or overload the student in those initial lessons.
Right.
You start with real basic things, and each lesson builds on the next. And everything is done in slow-mo. And they did not allow the students just to go out and start sparring willy-nilly, even though that's what everyone wants to do from the first day.
Yep.
It actually retards your progress because you just start, reinforcing
bad technique,
bad habits, trying to overwhelm people with strength and power. And you end up not learning nearly as quickly as when you go through the step-by-step process. And the people that, some of the best teachers in the world, of course, are the sons of Rorion Gracie. They're fantastic. But any of Helson Gracie, Henner and Hiro, I know those guys when they're just, they were still, a couple of them were still wearing diapers when I first met them.
Those guys do the UFC
Now they're giants. They break me in half with one arm.
Because they've got the academy in Torrance. Is that where the big
Yes, they do.
Gracie Academy is? They do the UFC breakdowns. If you ever see it, they train Ronda Rousey on her ground game. And yeah, you knew them when they were munchkins.
And I was Royce Gracie's trainer, his personal trainer for the first 3 UFCs. Royce, I actually introduced Royce to his wife, Marianne, and she used to be my kid's babysitter and actually taught. She was a exercise instructor at my academy. She was really excellent. In fact, I always accused Royce of stealing my best instructor when he took her back to California.
How come you weren't in the UFC documentary, Steve? Gosh, you knew everyone in the beginning,
Yeah, I mean, but Rorion just put it together on a shoestring budget.
Right.
Everyone just put in a certain amount of money, and we went out to Denver, didn't have any idea what to expect that first one, To tell the truth, I was pretty scared. I mean, I had a lot of faith in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu.
Right.
But man, when I saw that Ken Shamrock and the way he did that footlock and that the one kickboxer, I thought, oh my God.
Yeah,
this guy's basically naked with a little Speedo. And,
how big was Ken back then? 200-something pounds?
He was well over 200. I think maybe Hoist was 176 pounds soaking wet. And, he wasn't a real powerful guy, but he had amazing endurance. And, of course, he had that awesome jiu-jitsu technique,
right? But he didn't have a competition track record, though, did he?
No, he had never competed.
Seems like a big. I mean, in retrospect, it looks like a well-orchestrated scheme. But man, that's a big crapshoot on that night to make the new kid try to beat all these huge guys. Shamrock always had some footlock and leg lock skills.
He was no joke, that guy, man. But Horian said, well, I could have had Hickson do this, but everyone look at Hickson and say, well, look at this guy. He's such a specimen. I mean, he did have a hell of a physique,
right?
And he was strong. I mean, he had everything, strength and agility and flexibility and power and, I mean, just everything. And people would say, well, that's Hickson. But Horian, his whole point was, well, look at Hoist. He's not particularly athletically gifted, He's not like this big muscular behemoth. He had nice shape to him, but he was pretty on the thin side, wiry side.
Yeah.
And he's the nicest guy in the world. Very mild-mannered and so young. And Horian said, look, if people see Hoist, they're going to say, wow, if he can do this, well, maybe I have a chance too. Because that really does prove just how good the technique is. And, of course, they definitely prove that if you don't know jiu-jitsu, you're in trouble in a one-on-white, mano-a-mano fight. Pretty much the jiu-jitsu guy, if you go in a closed room and you close the door, the jiu-jitsu guy is going to be the one that comes walking back out,
right,
for sure.
With big numbers, like 94, 95% of the time.
Most of the time.
Yeah, I probably agree with that.
I couldn't even put a percentage on it, but I do know that, because before this era even happened, they had the $100,000 challenge.
Okay.
This was a write-up in Playboy magazine,
that was, right,
88 or 89. Okay. People was, this is so un-Buddha-like. It's like bullshit. Man, back in Japan, they used to have entire academies invade other academies. There would be swordsmen that show up at these, fencing academies, like Musashi.
Right,
and they would want to fight the head instructor to the death, man.
Right.
We're talking a serious...
And the 100,000 challenge was Horian would match it if anyone put
you
the
bring
money
your
up?
money, we'll bring our money, we'll put it all in a pile, the winner take all. But what was happening was people didn't want to put any money in.
Right.
And they would just come and challenge to a fight, and Gracies were never one to back down.
Which happened a lot, right? In those
it
early
happened
days?
more frequently.
You hear stories all the time about that happening.
I was there for a bunch of them.
Really?
And
what was that like?
It's pretty exciting, but then they got tired of it. I mean, usually they would take it easy on the guys a little bit, and then they'd always want a second or third chance because they just couldn't believe that this was happening.
Right, so they come back for more.
So they want to do it again, So towards the end, they started putting a little hurt on people just to discourage a second or third fight.
Right.
And then they got tired of just this happening all the time, so they started having the students do it as part of their education.
Okay.
And when I opened up my school in Philly under the Gracie name, I started getting people coming to my school. And I'd say, wait a second, man. This is like in the early 90s. We'd do it. We'd set up a video camera just like you have here on a tripod.
Okay.
So there could be no question about what happened.
Yeah.
No one can talk smack. Or no one can claim something happened that didn't.
Right.
We'd put up the video camera and we'd do it. And I was pretty scared. It's a very scary thing. You have a guy that wants to hurt you.
Right.
And wow. I mean, I probably won about 20 of them myself.
Really?
Yeah, it all happened the same way.
And these guys come swinging. There's obviously...
Swinging, kicking. They said, well, can I kick? Can I punch? I said, well, do you kick or punch in your style? They said, yeah. I said, well, do whatever you can, man.
Probably scarier than a sanctioned fight.
Quite scary. They're bare knuckle,
They got people with them. You don't know what's going on.
The only protective gear I'd wear, I'd put a mouthpiece in there just in case they clip me good, And usually it all would start like a clinch. Being a collegiate wrestler, I usually... pretty much take the fight to the ground.
Would you clinch up first, or would you shoot for the double leg or that kind of thing?
It varied,
Okay.
It just depends. If I could get a good single or double, I would. Sometimes the guy would be a little evasive, and I would end up clinching. Rarely would I be on the bottom, but occasionally I would be. Okay. And then usually you'd slap the person around a little bit with open hand slaps so as not to injure your hand. They would almost always turn over. You put the hooks in the choke. Okay. I would say that was 90% of the fights.
Wow.
Occasionally a guy would be smart enough to not to turn over. So then he would usually give up an arm lock of some type.
Okay, and that's how it happened.
Almost every time. Time after time after time. Hundreds of challenge fights. I had a video library at my school, Maxwell. of all these fights. And of course, I got tired of doing it myself.
Right.
I started jiu-jitsu relatively late in life, 38 years old, and by the time the UFC started rolling around, when it was really under full swing, I was in my 40s, and I just didn't feel like doing that anymore.
So you've been intimately involved with the Gracie family. You even stayed with Elio down at his ranch
in
Brazil.
What a fantastic experience that was.
I mean, for people that don't know, Elio is considered, one of the founders of Jiu-Jitsu. Obviously, his brother,
well, Carlos for sure,
Carlos
arguably opened up the scene.
Elio's the guy, he's the movie guy in the movie Choke, and he's Hickson's father, and, he has the persona built behind him. But these are legendary figures, right?
And Elio fought quite a few fights himself.
Right, and he was small.
He was very small, but he just wanted to prove the efficiency of jiu-jitsu. So they weren't afraid to put their money where their mouth was. And they weren't afraid to put up or shut up. They walked the talk.
And that was the big difference.
That was the big difference. There wasn't any of this death touch nonsense or, my techniques are so dangerous I can't do them to you. Or, it's like they would put themselves on the line.
Right.
And they were perfectly willing to lose if they had to.
Right.
And that's a very scary thing. That's a very fearful thing.
Right.
I don't know too many people who'd be willing to do that.
Yeah. And they were willing to teach it. It was like a weird combination. And the fact that Elio was small, it customized these techniques to being, applicable for the smaller guy and develop the art. So it's like a really weird combination of all those things.
To tell the God's honest truth, Kip Pellegro said this to me one time. He's been a huge supporter of the Abu Dhabi website.
Okay.
And he's been really instrumental in promoting jiu-jitsu around the world and U.S. He said to me, I don't know of any other martial arts, Steve, where a really little guy would have a chance of survival against a bigger guy. You're not going to beat a bigger, stronger, faster, younger guy, heavier guy, let's say kickboxing.
Right.
I mean, case in point. Remember the K1 fights?
Yeah.
Remember the year that Bob Sapp went in and won K1?
Yeah.
Bob Sapp was an NFL football player. He had never had any training in martial arts. He listed his martial art as NFL. And he went in there and just basically monkey slapped the shit out of the top kickboxers in the world and knocked them all out.
It's embarrassing to watch now, but yeah, he did.
Well, the guy was huge. I mean, later he did get knocked out by some really crafty fighters who figured out how to fight him.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, no one knew how to handle this guy. He was just a behemoth.
Yeah.
Now, what chance would a little guy have against somebody like that? None, unless you do jiu-jitsu. You could survive against a guy like that. You couldn't beat him, but he couldn't beat you either. Right. You would walk out still alive. He wouldn't be able to get in a position where he could really hurt you enough to kill you or maim you.
So that's what Elio developed. Basically, what was he
developed a very awesome self-defense style that you could defend yourself. He never said that he could beat everyone, but he could certainly defend himself against bigger, stronger, faster, heavier guys.
Right.
And frequently, though, these people will basically Elliot told me one time his jiu-jitsu was more like ground aikido.
Okay.
And he couldn't really do it to you. You kind of did it to yourself.
Okay.
He wasn't looking to win. He wasn't looking to do anything to you. You just kind of fell into a trap at some point.
What was his ranch like? What was it like hanging down in Brazil with him?
It was so awesome. He basically lived off the land there in Teresópolis. It was up in the mountains.
Okay.
And he would milk his own cows. And he knew that I liked raw cow milk. I've always been into this type of thing, and he'd bring me a big frothy pitcher straight from the cow. It's so delicious. You could actually taste what the cows have been eating. They were eating clover today, or they've been eating this type of grass today. You could taste it in the milk. Wow. He'd make his own cheese.
Yeah.
You've heard of this acai that's so popular, the Brazilian fruit?
Yeah.
He would pick it off the trees and juice it right in his kitchen.
And it's a pretty sour tasting.
It's bitter. It's really nasty.
Right.
What you get here in the United States or in the UK is like the sugared up version.
Right. Even in Rio, you get one with guarana, and there's lots of sugar. Yeah. Like, I have it after jiu-jitsu. I remember that was my reward in Rio. And I remember eating it being like, this is probably the worst, the least healthiest thing. Okay, the acai is healthy, but there's tons of sugar in that, right?
Yeah, it's basically just ice cream.
Ice cream, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
fat ice cream.
So you spent time with Elio down there. You got to see the lifestyle and hang out at his ranch. He must have been old then, right?
Very old. He was in his 90s, I believe.
It was probably after the film Choke or somewhere?
It was actually when Royce went down to fight in that special event in Copacabana Beach, where he lost to Valige.
Okay. This is after UFC.
Yeah.
Okay.
People pronounce it's W-A-L-L-I-D. W-A.
Walid.
Yeah, but it's pronounced Valiji.
Oh, okay.
And Ishmael Valiji.
Oh, yeah.
And,
he's legend.
he shocked everyone by passing Royce out.
Okay.
And,
Well.
yeah, that was embarrassing at the time.
Walid's a
he
warrior.
Was a tough guy, man.
Yeah.
But, Horian had, talked a little bit too much smack about, the pure waters and this and that, forgetting that there's a lot of guys that know jiu-jitsu, man.
Right.
The Gracie family had certainly the best teaching style for sure. But, there was plenty of guys that really knew the jiu-jitsu competition game.
Okay.
Now, could have Valiji done what Royce did in the UFC? I don't think so.
Okay. What'd you think of the movie Choke? Is it accurate? Is it not?
Well, not being there myself, but,
Right.
Knowing the brothers and knowing Hickson and so forth, for sure. There was nothing fake about those fights. And the Japanese definitely tried to get the best guys that they could into the show.
Right.
A lot of people are just too afraid to, put up or shut up.
Right.
They had heard about Hickson. They were really intimidated.
That movie is just an epic, and it's such a great work of documentary, and there'll be nothing ever like it again. And it was that snapshot of him, and I think it gets across the essence of Hickson as much as you can in a movie, right? I mean, you've met him, but
well, I thought it was really interesting. You could see how nervous he was, and he was scared.
Yeah.
But he said, "Hey, man, you'd be a fool not to be scared."
Right.
It's not being scared. It's the difference between a coward and, let's say, a hero is what you do with that fear. And he was able to channel that fear and perform and not let it get the best of him and pull him down. But you could see he was just like everybody else. He was nervous and, he had fears and so forth. But he really did a good job at handling it. And, wow, that was a magnificent performance. He fought some pretty tough guys.
Yeah, he talks about it in the beginning of the movie. He just says, I'm scared of everything, It's not what you usually associate with Hickson, but I guess it's because he's very smart, in that way. How did you meet Joe Rogan? How did you start training with him? I know you guys had done a lot of kettlebell and all sorts of other work. How did you guys hook up?
Well, Joe had heard about me through the grapevine. And
MMA kind of training?
Yeah. He actually invited me to the house. And
Okay.
I went out, and he has a hell of a home gym.
Yeah, I've seen pictures
And,
of it.
he's quite a specimen. He is like really, really an elite level fighter.
Right.
He's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's been training no-gi submission wrestling for years and years and years. And he was a hell of a kickboxer before he even started with the Jiu-Jitsu. He's been doing it since he's been a little boy.
Yeah, if you see his spinning back kicks that he demonstrates, and what's Joe, 46 now? And even you can see his kicking technique.
And he's incredible, powerful man.
Right.
That bag was bending in half. That big, heavy... 200-pound banana bag? Those banana bags?
Yeah.
He was bending it in half. It made my ribs hurt just looking at it. It was like, oh my God.
And you've trained a lot of people in your time.
I've trained a lot of people, and I know a good athlete when I see it. And he was a lot of fun to work with. And I went to his place twice just to work on basic techniques. And I worked with him in Toronto also at a gym there outside of Toronto.
Okay.
Doing some work, just showing basic exercises, working on basic technique, basic form. My concern is always that people don't hurt themselves. Because in my philosophy of exercise, when you're doing supplementary training, you should not be producing injuries. If you're hurting yourself in training, then you have no clue about what you're doing. You don't know what you're doing. You don't.
What kind of
training should prevent injury, not cause injury.
Okay.
And now I'm not talking about sports, jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, rugby, basketball, gridiron style American football. I'm not talking about those things. You expect to get hurt in those sports. That's all part of the game. Even running and cycling, you're going to get some overuse injuries and so forth. But your supplementary training, where you're building your general strength to make yourself more proficient, it should also toughen your joints and make you less susceptible to injury.
Okay.
But if you're hurting yourself in the gym, lifting weights or doing bodyweight calisthenics, then you really need to step back and take a look at what you're doing. You're training wrong.
So for someone like Joe who trains Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, he also trains a lot of his kicking and striking techniques. What kind of supplemental training is your basic?
Well, for all athletes, the idea is not to just get as strong as possible. You're not a strength specialist. You're not a power lifter. You're not an Olympic weightlifter. You're not a kettlebell sport guy.
Right.
Okay? Those are specific sports unto themselves. What you want is general training. What is general strength? Exercises that take little or no skill to perform. They have the biggest bang for the buck. They're the ones that will give you the greatest carryover value into other activities. The idea that you can do kettlebell snatches or Olympic lifting to make yourself more explosive, I've never seen any evidence to support that whatsoever.
Wow.
I've never seen in the 52 years that I've been training that you can selectively work fast twitch muscles.
Wow, because a lot of entire programs are built on that.
Well, it's under the premise that you can selectively recruit fast twitch muscle fiber. I've never seen that.
Okay.
And there's plenty of people on the same wave as myself.
Okay.
Tons of people, maybe half the strength community agrees with that.
Okay. So
but I'm just talking about my own experience. I'm not talking about double-blind studies or any of this stuff. I'm just saying 52 years in the gym, having done it myself, I did not see the benefit. And when you start slinging weights around like that, the risk to benefit ratio is dubious at best.
Okay.
I find that controlled speed movement is much better. And, you know, obviously I want to get strong, but not to the point where I become a specialist. There is a point of diminishing returns in your strength training. You know, how much stronger do you need to be in order to perform? You know, there is a point where once you are lifting a certain level, to lift more requires too much extra time in order to get to the next level.
Right. If you look at a typical MMA athlete, they have to spread their time between wrestling and jiu-jitsu and boxing and everything.
And all those things are a form of resistance training anyway, so it's really easy to burn out and get overtrained.
Right.
They certainly don't need to be doing metabolic circuits like you see in these silly magazines and all that kind of
Okay, so Olympic lifts, CrossFit style, stay away from them for MMA training.
For sure, and just for your own joint health and safety.
Okay.
I mean,
because it's just too much risk for the reward.
Too much risk for the reward, and you don't get that much carryover benefit to improvement in your sport. The body is very specific.
Okay.
And you adapt to, the more skillier something is, let's say Olympic lifts, that's a really athletic thing. That's a real athletic feat. But the time spent in performing and perfecting them and so forth could be better spent on the mat, for sure.
Okay.
And there's plenty of other ways, safer ways, to get really, really strong that don't involve throwing yourself under a barbell. Okay. Basically, Olympic lifting is throwing a barbell and jumping underneath it and catching it.
I've never heard it described that way, but you have a good point there. So what is the supplemental exercises that you're...
Well, just basic stuff like chin-ups or pull-ups, dips. And once you can do a certain number of repetitions, adding weight to your body weight. So let's say, for example, a young fellow that works up to the point where he can actually do repetitions with half of his body weight tied around his waist. He's as strong as he ever needs to be.
For dips and for pull-ups.
Yeah, for dips and pull-ups.
Okay. So weighted dips
and
pull-ups.
Well, think about that. Like, how much do you weigh? How many kilos?
80.
80 kilos? So imagine now you could do chin-ups and dips with 40 kilograms tied around your waist.
That's a lot of weight. Yeah.
Dude, you'd be a monster. Right. How much stronger would your arms and chest and shoulders and biceps need to be, and lats? I mean, you'd be as strong as you'd ever need to be.
Yeah.
You know?
Probably don't even need to be that strong for anything.
You probably wouldn't. Most really great jiu-jitsu players, for example, they're strong, but they're not crazy strong.
Right.
You know? For obviously for the lower body, some form of squatting and some form of hinging, where you're using your hips and your glutes.
Deadlift.
Very, very important.
Okay.
Deadlifts are a great lift. Some form of squat. It could be one-legged pistol squats. It could be Zercher. I'm not a huge fan of barbell back squats for a lot of people. Okay. Really hard to teach. And once you get to a certain level of weight, you get that shearing force in your spine.
Okay.
You know, I'm not against them. I certainly have done tons of them myself.
Right.
But at my age now, I don't choose to load my spine up with heavy barbell anymore.
Right.
There's plenty of other ways. I really love doing one-legged body weight squats.
Right.
Or holding extra weight.
Those are
very athletic movement.
Great for flexibility. Great for
mobility of the hip and so forth.
Kettlebells. I know you were one of the first guys to teach them. Do you use them now a lot in your practice?
Nah, because I travel all the time. I don't have a bell available. I would definitely do swings and probably the get-up exercise. I introduced the Turkish get-up to the kettlebell community at the very first RKC.
What year was that?
Oh, man. When was that? Was that 90? 90? 91, 92? 93? 94? 95? 96? 97? 98? 99? 100? 101? 102? 103? 104? 105? 106? 107? 108? 109? 110? 111? 112? 113? 114? 115? 116? 117? 118? 119? 120? 121? 122? 123? 124? 125? 126? 127? 128? 129? 130? 131? 132? 133? 134? 135? 136? 137? 138? 139? 140? 141? 142? 143? 144? 145? 146? 147? 148? 149? 150? 151? 152? 153? 154? 155? 156? 157? 158? 159? 160? 161? 162? 163? 164? 165? 166? 167? 168? 169? 170? 171? 172? 173? 174? 175? 176? 177? 178? 179? 180? 181? 182? 183 damn, if I can remember, 98, I think,
Okay.
99 maybe.
And so, and kettlebells weren't being used in the States.
No, no one even heard of them.
In like the 90s, they weren't being used.
No.
Or what? Okay. And then you heard about them.
I had heard about it. I actually read an article in Milo magazine. I'd always known about them because I used to collect old-time strongman books, and there was always be pictures of these guys, and they called them ring weights and so forth.
Okay.
And unbeknownst to many people, the ring weight or the kettlebell was not invented in Russia. It was invented in Germany. The Germans were the first to use those.
Okay.
And here in the UK, the Scots used to train with a similar device.
Really?
They used to swing the weight over the high bar as part of the Highland Games. It's been a traditional part.
So this-
But they also did other exercises, and they would do swings with this way back in history.
How old's the kettlebell? 100 years old? More?
No one really knows, but there's some conjectures. They believe that perhaps Napoleon's soldiers and the Tsar's soldiers, they used to have a handle that carried cannonballs, to carry the ammo.
Right.
And soldiers being soldiers with nothing better to do, they start fooling around the campfire at night and, hey, look what I can do, and I bet you can't do this, and coming up with different ideas of swinging and lifting these cannonballs with the handle.
Okay.
Another theory is that they were weights for agriculture.
Okay.
You would use these as counterweights on a scale.
Okay.
With grain.
Okay.
They came in various sizes.
So maybe 1700s, 1800s. Maybe
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they've been around for a while, and people just being people, and their time off, they would, men throughout the ages have always been fascinated with feats of strength and one-upping each other, and
Yeah, and we love
fooling
something
around.
complicated, right? That's why men
Yeah,
love
of course.
jiu-jitsu, because it's ultra complicated.
It's probably the ultimate, man.
You can never master it, so that's why we love it, right?
I always said that wrestling, I loved wrestling, but it's pretty much like checkers.
Okay.
Jiu-jitsu is like chess. Actually, it's kind of like the Star Trek three-dimensional
Right.
chess, man. I mean, it's pretty complex,
Right.
the game.
Okay. Now, do you wish you had patented the kettlebell, because now it's so popular? Is it something you wish you got more involved in? Is it a fad, do you think?
I think it's a bit of a fad.
Okay.
I mean,
Do they
it's
go in
certainly-
20-year
It's
waves?
certainly a great tool, for sure. It's been around for a while. It has stood the test of time.
Right.
But some people have almost formed what I call the cult of the kettlebell.
Yeah,
And then you
definitely.
have the subset of what they call the GS sport or gear voice sport. It's basically endurance weightlifting.
Okay.
Okay,
Oh,
there's
right.
where people will actually contest.
Like 100 snatches.
Yeah, they'll like that.
Right,
I
for
mean,
time and-
for time and so forth. And of course, the claim always was that this is the best way to prepare yourself for all other activities. They call it the "what the hell" effect. It just completely defies all motor learning for the last 100 years.
Right.
You do not get a care of a value in other sports. You get really good at throwing a kettlebell around, and that's it. I can prove it. You take a guy like that and you put him on the wrestling mat, and he'll be gassed in no time. You put him in the swimming pool, he'll be gassed. There's no such thing as one activity preparing you for all activities. It just doesn't exist.
Okay.
The only care of value is general strength training, non-skillular, basic strength training exercises.
And those are the ones you're talking about. Those are
Deadlift, squats,
squats,
pull-ups or chin-ups,
Okay.
dips, bench press, bent over row, standing military press, but done with good form.
Right.
Arguably some isolation movements like curls, tricep extensions, various dumbbell exercises. There's nothing wrong with doing a little isolation work if you have a particular weakness in one area. I'd like to see someone rehabilitate a knee without doing a leg extension. You see,
Right.
There is a place for isolation movements. There's even a place for machines.
Okay. But basically keep it old school.
Yeah, but you want to keep it mostly heavy compound lifts,
Right, okay.
with real basic exercises. And there's nothing sexy about that. There's
Right.
nothing fancy.
I know, that's the thing. You
And
can't
it's
sell
nothing
it.
mysterious, and
Right.
you can't sell it. You can't make money off of it. And to the average person, it's boring.
Right.
They want some snap, pizzazz, sizzle,
Right.
Like, I was shocked to see the Bulgarian training bags so popular in the UK.
Okay. These are the big,
Ivan
big
Ivanov,
sandbags. and
great
stuff.
guy, but man, he couldn't even give those damn things away for years.
Right.
He actually gave me one. He was trying to get me to endorse it. I saw it as good for one or two exercises, but I found it kind of silly, and I just didn't really, It just wasn't that good.
It's amusing to see what comes and goes, but it's important that you say, be careful what you do with your supplemental training and don't make that take over what you're training for. I mean, that's the basic thing that you're saying.
And if you're just training for health and longevity and fitness, it doesn't need to be that fancy either. It really, truly does not need to be that fancy.
Right.
Basic stuff. If a person would work up to the point where they could chin themselves with either arm, one arm chin, right? And
it's an impressive maneuver.
do dips with, let's say at least half their body weight. But imagine you could even do a body weight dip with your body weight. You weigh 80 kilos. Imagine doing an 80 kilogram dip, and worked up to the point where you could easily do 20 repetitions of the one-legged pistol squat. You would be as strong and developed as you'd ever need to be for any activity anywhere.
Right.
And there's nothing sexy about that. Just 3 basic movements would make you as developed as possible. You can't make money off that.
Right.
And no one can sell that.
Right. And that's longevity as well, because you're not busting up your joints.
You're not busting up.
I got to ask you about the Barstarzz guys, because I've been a little bit, I've been doing weight training for many years, and I lift a couple times a week, and the muscle up is now fascinating me, and I want to try to get into the muscle up. And I think it's good to have some goals, especially around your body weight. You went and trained with the Barstarzz guys. First of all, props to you for doing that, because a lot of trainers would never put themselves out there, because it's easy to look stupid next to the Barstarzz guys.
Oh, yeah, for sure. They could have made me look like a total idiot, because believe me, my prowess with urban gymnastics is pretty mediocre.
Right. So that's props to you for going out there. I don't know if a lot of people notice that, but I'm like, not many. I would say very few trainers would even go step on there with them, because if they showed up at your jiu-jitsu mat, you'd tap them out. So
well, they knew that.
They knew that too. So
they were very respectful young men, and really very helpful. But see, it's all attitude. Just as if a guy would come to someone's jiu-jitsu school and be really arrogant, they might get schooled, a bit of a lesson.
Okay.
And I guarantee if I wouldn't have gone there and not have been humble, and that's my nature anyway, because I really respect what they do, they would have schooled me, man. They would have made me look pretty silly.
How was it?
And they could do it, because they are amazing.
Right.
But yeah, it was really cool. One of the things that is really important for a person to understand, because there's a lot of the urban gymnasts out there.
Yeah.
I met a group when I was in St. Petersburg, Russia.
Oh, really?
These kids were doing some whack stuff, man.
Yeah, they had some contests. And
there's
they fly
these.
the guys
There's the Barstarzz in Bondi Beach in Australia. When I was there, I met those guys.
They got some guys here in London.
Yeah, it's
slowly
like
getting bigger.
real movement. You know, it's kids that
Street workouts
are
here in
looking
London.
for something to belong to, a sense of belonging. They don't compete in regular sports, and they want a feeling of community, camaraderie.
It's like a clique. If your friends aren't doing jiu-jitsu, you're not going to do that. But you get the guys that want to do something physical. They want to do something positive with their life. But, it just, you're not always with the right people.
They like to show their prowess, I mean, everyone likes a little show off, little creativity and so forth.
Fighters are all performers and on some level, right?
But it's very important to realize that these feats do have a benefit to risk ratio. It's not all just fun and games. What you don't see is the aches, the pains, the elbows, the shoulders. I mean, both those young men told me that their shoulders and elbows were really bogging them a lot. And why not? You're putting a lot of stress in those joints.
When I see the Barstarzz guys, I think shoulder problems. I just think, ouch, some of those moves.
There's a reason why you don't see gymnasts over 30 years old. You don't see anybody in the world stage. Maybe 1 or 2 exceptions here and there, but usually they're pretty busted up. And what do you hear about older gymnasts almost all the time? Surgeries, all the surgeries these guys had, all the injuries they had.
Rotator cuff, basically.
You cannot put your body through that type of stress in those type of leverage positions without paying the price. The price comes in osteoarthritis, osteoitis growing in the joints, all sorts of muscle and tendon problems. So you have to ask yourself, okay, why am I doing it? What is the benefit? What is it I hope to achieve? Am I willing to pay the price if something should go wrong? If you can answer those questions, go for it, man. And if you're thinking, well, maybe it's not as important as I thought, maybe you should back off a little bit.
Fair enough. I think my goal of a muscle up, and I cannot do a muscle up right now. I can bust out a decent number of pull-ups, but I mean, I'm telling you, these Barstarzz guys, they make it all look super easy.
They look so easy.
Jesus. I mean, I challenge anyone to go out there and try some of these moves. They are so hard. I went to my gym and asked every personal trainer in there if they could do a muscle up, and some of them were like, yeah, but none of them could do one. So even that move,
The bar muscle up is a very interesting movement. I've never figured it out myself. I worked up to a point of 7 muscle ups in the rings.
Okay.
I could do that.
Okay.
I was pretty proud of that.
That's impressive.
I'm probably down to about 2 or 3 now. It's one of those things if you don't practice. But my record was 7, and that was about 5 years ago.
That's impressive.
But a bar muscle up has always defied me.
Huh.
And it definitely is a strength move, but there's a lot of technique to it also.
Okay.
Ironically, my son, Zach, he can do 15 slow ones. No momentum, no swinging, no kipping, slow.
You see the guys on Barstarzz
He just goes up and he goes
It's
down.
like the show off where they kind of go like this. Yeah.
And where my son got that type of leverage, his arms are just amazingly developed. And I think just, a lot of it's proportions, Some people will never be able to do certain things. Some people will never do an iron cross in the rings.
Right.
Some people will never do one of those front planches with straight arms. Yeah. It's just not.
Center of gravity.
A lot of this has to do with leverage.
Right.
Muscle insertion points, the ratio of bone, like your upper arm bone length compared to your forearm bone length. If that's an unfavorable lever arm,
then it's just not going to happen.
It's never going to happen. Okay. So no sense getting yourself too upset about it.
Okay, fair enough. Well, it's a goal for mine, but I won't get too obsessed with it.
Go with it. Yeah.
And no, I know what you say. I was watching some of those things, and all I kept thinking was shoulder pain, just because you look at some of these things, and I'm amazed some of those guys are still doing it. Because
well, they probably won't be by the time they're 40 or whatever. You'll see it stop. Right. And that's not necessarily a reason not to do things either. A long life of never having had any glory or have done anything, that doesn't mean much either, man. I think of Bruce Lee. What was he, 32 when he died? I mean, what a meteor. Probably had one of the most profound impacts of martial arts in the world. Yeah. And he was like a meteor. But, that was an amazing life well lived. Right. He packed an awful lot in those 32 years. Yeah. And, the average life expectancy, the best athletes in the United States are pretty much the NFL football players. That's why the U.S. pretty much sucks in Olympic weightlifting these days. Because why the hell would a guy lift weights for peanuts when he can go and make, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars playing NFL football? Right. So these guys are the biggest, strongest, fastest guys we got. But unfortunately, their life expectancy is about 64 years old. They die early lives. But if you were to ask some of these guys, hey, was it worth it? I think they'd probably, the majority, say, hell yeah. The adulation, the adrenaline, being on national TV, playing in a stadium with, 100,000 people, the roar of the crowd, the women, the money, the parties, the celebrity. Hell yeah. It's worth shaving a number of years off the end of my life.
Everything's a trade-off.
Everything's a trade-off.
Let's talk about longevity. Steve, you're 61. You look fantastic. I just turned 43, and I'm feeling it. It's definitely things slow down. You have to really stay on your game. Nutrition becomes more and more important. How do you do it? How do you stay active? And what do you do different now than you used to do? And what do you tell people that are your age that come up to you and say, I want to be like you, Steve?
Well, I had some really good mentors, by the way. Okay. My college wrestling coach is still hard at it. He's in his late 70s. The guy still skips rope like an hour a day. Wow. Yeah, he still looks like he did back in the 70s when I was wrestling at the university. I mean, the guy's amazing. Okay. So, I had some good mentors.
And the Gracie stayed in shape, right?
Gracies are amazing. They all look young and well.
They do all look super young,
and they had a lot of time in the sun too, but yet they still have a fairly youthful appearance. But a lot of the youthfulness is in your mind. You got to get rid of the images of mom and dad and grandma and grandpa and get that out of there. Most of us had elderly relatives that didn't fare so well. I had made it my mission not to end up like my grandparents and even my parents now. It's a mental thing.
How so?
There's an expectation. You actually have a belief system.
In yourself.
And the belief system creates the circumstances. So you will act out according to your beliefs. So it's important to get rid of all those negative beliefs concerning aging.
What would be an example of one of those?
Well, I can't do this anymore, or I'm too old for this. And you hear people say things, and for sure, they are too old because they believe that. Yeah. So, keeping youthful and young, I like to keep company with younger people. I don't like to be around old people. I refuse to go to funerals. I don't need that. The guy's dead. He doesn't need me there anymore. Right, okay. Okay? Funerals are for the living, but It's just the way it is. But realizing that, none of us get out of here alive. We're all going to get old. We're all going to die. Whatever amazing feats of strength and all that you did, that will go away. That's an acceptance of fact. No big deal there. But there's still plenty of things that you can do. And you look at all the things that you can do. And one of the things I've changed over the years is I just give myself more recovery time. And I don't push the envelope nearly as hard as I used to when I was younger. More recovery time. And of course, you got to get really strict with the diet as you get older. You can't have those cheat days like you did when you were like,
Because it stays with you.
Yeah,
right?
it's more austerity. You become a little bit more austere. And you realize that, these binges and cheats, just not worth it, man.
And they make you feel horrible.
You just feel crappy for days on end. And you begin to realize, like, wow, if I'm tempted to do this or that, I just think about, like, what the repercussions are going to be the next day. And as you get older, you can start to think more clearly along those lines. You know what's going to happen. You've already experienced it. So, you're able to get a little bit more control over your urges, and you're not so impulsive.
Okay.
About the way you conduct your life.
When it comes to easing yourself back, I mean, I've seen videos of you training and things like that. When it comes to, say, you're going to do 10 or 20 hill sprints, will you be like, I'm going to push myself to get that next one done? Or are you thinking, I don't need to do that anymore? Or will you still push yourself from a cardio standpoint?
Well, I'll still push myself occasionally. You still have to push the body to create a demand. You're basically tapping into your survival mechanism with training, so that the body has a reason to maintain a certain level or even get stronger. But what you will find is once you get much after 50, the days for PRs and personal bests are long gone.
After 40, I think.
What you're trying to do is maintain a high level.
Okay.
And instead of focusing on all the things you can no longer do, you have to be grateful for all the things that you can do. I find a lot of people don't express gratitude. Gratitude, especially when you express it aloud, I even have a little mantra where I will thank the universe for whatever it is, and then I'll give the reason why, and then I'll say thank you, thank you, thank you. It's like a little mantra within myself.
Okay.
Because it helps attract more of same. What I try not to do is think of all the things I don't have, all the things I lack, all the things I can no longer do, because when you concentrate on what it is that you don't want, you tend to attract more of same. When you think about all the things that you are grateful for and all the things that you can do, you have a tendency to attract more of same. So you keep in a perpetual flow. Whoop.
Do you do this out loud, this universe theme thanking mantra? Do you do that once a day,
every day.
Or in the morning?
Every sale I make on my website, I look, I see what the person bought, and I'll thank the universe for that money.
Wow.
And because it allows me to live a life of freedom, or because I can live wherever I want to in the world, because I can travel freely, because I'm able to make money on the internet, which I thought was just amazing. And then I'll say, thank you, thank you, thank you, whatever the cause is. And maybe it'll be 20 of them that day, 20 sales. And I'll give thanks to Almighty God for each and every one of those sales, because I am genuinely grateful for that. And it's the same thing with my body. Instead of saying, I feel like I'm getting a little pudgy, or, my arms are starting to shrink, I'm starting to lose muscle. Instead of saying stuff like that, I give thanks for the strength that I do have. I give thanks for the level of health that I do have.
And spend some time with younger people.
Pardon?
And spend time around younger people.
Yeah, of course, because who wants to be around a bunch of old cranky people? I mean, there's some plenty of older people that are pretty spry and have a real spark, but they're few and far between. Everyone buys into this aging myth, but it really is truly a mindset. I've seen people in their 80s that are younger than some people in their 20s. I have met people like that.
And
it's
it's
just a sparkle in their eye.
Right.
Okay, yeah, they can't do muscle ups in the bar and stuff like that, but they are still young in spirit.
Should you be active every day at whatever
Oh,
age?
absolutely.
Okay.
Think of sitting in the chair as the new smoking. One of the most devastating things, one of the negative impacts that you can have on your health is sitting for prolonged periods of time during the day. You must get up and move. You got to get up and walk. You got to get up. I'm a huge advocate of joint mobility exercises, where you're moving your limbs in these different patterns to keep the joints nourished and to keep range of motion.
What's an example? Like a burpee or just
No,
movement?
I mean just like this would be an elbow mobility drill.
Okay.
Internal, external rotation. Moving the wrist, finger waves. But you're just doing this stuff all day long, marching in place. I'm huge on what they call vestibular reset exercise, where you get down and you mirror the movements of a infant, a baby, rolling over, crawling and creeping on your stomach, crawling on all fours, doing Spider-Man crawls or leopard crawls. Cross-crawl patterning techniques are fantastic. Probably one of the best fitness things that you could do.
What do those do for you?
Well, one of the things that separates old from young is the ability to be comfortable on the floor. And specifically get down and up off the floor, being able to rise effortlessly on the floor and up. It's shocking how many people can't do it. I swear to God, my mother, for example, she's 78. I don't believe she could get down on the floor and get back up.
Right. Okay.
And why? Because she forgot how to do it. She sat so much. Your body and your brain in particular is so efficient, it gets rid of any movement patterns or what they call motor pathway, signal to muscle and back.
Yeah.
It gets rid of any pathway that you don't use regularly. So that means if your predominant activity during the day is pretty much sitting behind the computer, you're going to have very poor posture, forward head, kyphotic curve, and you're going to lose your ability to move. And some people say, yeah, but I work out every day. But I'm telling you, if you're basically sitting or lying in bed 23 hours a day, 1 hour of training, what's your body going to adapt to more? 1 hour of movement? Yeah. And that's a big commitment. Most people don't do an hour.
Right.
Or 23 hours of sitting or lying down. It's the body adapts to, the stimulus that you give it. So I try to get people up all the time. Use these type of desks where are chest high, so you're
standing.
They call them standing desks.
Okay, and what about the treadmill desks?
Yeah, treadmill desks. You get up and move, for goodness sake. Because think of the average person. They get up in the morning, they sit at the breakfast table, then they sit in the car to work, then they sit at their desk all day, then they sit at the lunch table, then they go back and sit at work, they sit in the car, the bus, go home. What's the first thing to do when they hit the house? They'll usually sit down and answer their emails on their personal computer. Maybe they'll watch TV. Maybe they'll get a little bit of exercise in, and then they retire and they go to bed and they're laying down all night. It's not enough movement.
Okay.
They need to take time out all day long, little mini walks, little mini exercise breaks, put the foot on the desk, stretch out those hamstrings a little bit, do some, Qigong waist twisters, some, bend at the waist, do a few body weight squats, just all day long. Every time you think about it, you're just moving like a kid.
Okay. Sitting is the new smoking. I'm going to be thinking about that all day, Steve. A couple more things quickly. Your diet. You've got an interesting diet. I know that you kind of cycle different types of foods. I think you do bits of fasting. Tell me about your diet as much as you can in a few minutes.
Well, anytime I don't feel well, I fast. I don't eat anything at all. If people want to read a fascinating treatise on diet, they should look for Dr. John Tilden, Tilden. He wrote a fascinating book called Toxemia Explained. It's a free PDF on the internet. You can go to the Soil and Health Library, and it's a free download.
Okay.
So it doesn't cost a thing. The guy was a genius. He was like a yogi, like a rishi. And most of the things that he was advocating back in the 1930s, the yogis had been saying, 5,000 years ago in Ayurvedic medicine.
Okay.
And also, interestingly enough, the Gracies echoed a lot of his ideas also. I'm a real advocate of food combining, not mixing too many foods in one meal. I have a fruit-based meal, a starch-based meal, and a protein and vegetable-based meal.
Separate, yes.
Separate.
Okay.
Children called it crowded nutrition. When you mix too many things together, let's say rice or potatoes, a piece of bread, you have meat, a salad, maybe dessert, there's a real tendency to overstimulate the taste buds, become overstimulated, the taste sensations, and there's a real tendency to overeat.
Okay.
But when you separate the food, I tell you, if you're eating just fruit, it's really hard to overeat fruit, And all this protein nonsense, that's pretty much propaganda put out there by the protein purveyors. Who are the people saying we need all this protein? Pretty much the protein salesmen that are selling whey protein.
Yeah, the old 2 grams per kilo, things that we all knew when we were lifting weights, and I just don't think that's true.
I don't think it's true at all. I've seen guys on low protein diets just as muscular as guys that are gouging themselves with protein. But like whey protein, in the past, it was a waste product that you fed to the hogs. It was a byproduct of the milk and dairy industry. People just threw it away, and now they're trying to convince us that it's an elixir. In truth, I believe the way most of it is manufactured, it's a poison. But yeah, so strict food combining.
Okay.
If I feel like I'm putting on a little extra weight, I will cut out the starches and go to 2 fruit-based meal and 1 protein vegetable-based meal for a while.
Okay.
Anytime I have any cold symptoms or any feelings of distress, I will fast on just water.
And that could go for 24 hours or
I've gone 14 days without eating.
Wow.
Yeah.
If you're feeling sick.
If I'm feeling sick. The 14-day fast was just a cleanse.
Okay.
I just wanted to go through the experience of not eating for a prolonged period of time. I read about the old timers. They would do up to 28 days at different times. And all the great philosophers and all the great spiritual leaders at some point, even Jesus himself, 40 days and 40 nights, Gandhi, all the great Greek philosophers from Pythagoras to Aristotle to Socrates would fast on a regular basis. So it's a time-honored way of purifying the body and the mind, because when you're not overburdened with digestion, people don't realize how much it takes out of you to digest your food. It's amazing what happens to your mind, the clarity of thinking, and it gives the body an opportunity to sweep out toxins that build in. I mean, as great as London is, all cities are very toxic. We have a lot of pollution in most major metropolitan cities across the world. You can't help but absorb a lot of that stuff in the air and the water and so forth. So your body, in its wisdom, will get rid of toxins when you stop eating.
Okay.
Your body will not go and start eating up valuable muscle or valuable internal organs. It will go to diseased or morbid tissues and get flush fat cells, because a lot of toxins are stored in the fatty tissue. So your body will burn all that stuff up and kick it out. So it's a really good way to preserve your youth and vital energy. So it's ironic that by not eating, you end up with more energy.
Well, did you have any epiphanies from your 14-day fast?
Yeah, it was a real spiritual high. Wow. I had some real realizations about what's important, what isn't important, and so forth.
Did you isolate yourself? I guess you probably stayed away.
Yeah, it's best not to work, and you can't maintain a regular schedule. It's best just to be able to lie down, take a nap whenever you want, because you will feel tired. Especially as you're going through the detoxification process. But you get like these real highs, and then you get some lows. So it's like they call it a fasting crisis.
Okay.
But I wouldn't advocate just anyone just go out and do a 14-day fast. Okay. But certainly anyone could do a 24 to 48-hour fast with no harm.
Water
you
fast.
could start on a Friday night and break the fast on Monday morning, and it would do great good.
Okay.
And most people fear hunger. They've been taught to fear it by well-meaning but misguided parents, usually mothers.
Right.
Oh, you have to eat something. Oh my God, it's like the worst thing in the world when you're a kid. Yeah. You're throwing your guts up and they're trying to feed you. It's like ludicrous, isn't it?
Right.
I mean, there's a reason why your stomach's upset and they're trying to put food in it. I mean, it's nuts. If you look at animals, they always will go off their food and they'll just lie in their little corner in their little pet bed. And then when they feel better, they get up and they start running around and they eat again. But humans are pretty silly creatures sometimes.
Right. Don't be afraid to skip a meal, that kind of thing.
Don't be afraid. No one ever died of missing a meal or
two. How do you feel about gluten?
I don't have a sensitivity myself.
Okay.
I believe that people definitely have some serious problems with it, but it's only because they've overeaten gluten and they've mixed it with too many things. Gluten is somewhat more difficult to digest than many other foods, and when you're eating it with like sandwiches, or you're eating it with all this other stuff, for sure you at some point may develop some type of intolerance. But is gluten a demon, or should it be demonized? It wasn't the gluten that is the problem. It's people's inability to digest it. And people can't digest it because they have weakened digestive systems, because they've been overloading it for so long and miscombining foods, overeating, eating way too much. So yeah, I could see where going off gluten would be a really good thing for those people. And maybe they can experiment and reintroduce it at a later date and see how they fare, But yeah, dairy products and gluten have no bother because I eat them by themselves.
Right.
And
so
I can burn them, digest them.
Right. So the typical meal that's created by chefs to keep your taste buds interested the whole time is probably doing the worst thing to you.
Absolutely.
Okay, right. The typical American meal where it's bread rolls and then this and the salad with the dressing and then the heavy meal and the dessert. It's just doing everything
dessert,
wrong.
man. The desserts. If you could do one thing to really save your digestion, just cut all desserts.
Okay.
If you absolutely must have a dessert, eat it as a meal by itself. Eat it by itself. If you need to have that ice cream, okay, fine. Have a meal of ice cream and then don't eat for 5 hours.
But don't pile it on top of
But don't pile it on top of a regular meal,
I found when I stopped having gluten a couple years ago, just kind of for an ayahuasca ceremony, but I found that if I avoid gluten and sugar, then I avoid 95% of the food sold on the high street, as we say here in the UK, which means you're avoiding most of the horrible things you shouldn't be eating anyways. So I find by doing that, you stay away from the sandwiches and all the horrible things.
Well, the worst thing that people can do that impairs the digestion is mixing starches and proteins, which would mean sandwiches. Or having rice and meat or rice and
so you don't think you shouldn't combine those?
No, no. Now, a really hard-working guy that is like really physically active, does a lot of outdoor stuff or whatever, you can get away with meat and potatoes. Right. Potatoes are an exception, but even that, for older people, better off having a starch meal and a protein meal, but not protein and starch.
Okay, so protein and vegetables, starch,
exactly,
and then a fruit meal, that kind of thing.
I almost did an ayahuasca thing.
Oh, really?
I wanted to do it. I read this English writer, Stuart Wilde. He's a spiritual guy.
Okay.
He's kind of like me. He just travels around full time. He'll sit and meditate in a chair and then decide. He'll get a hit and say, oh, that's where I need to go next. That's how he decides where to go. But anyway, I read about ayahuasca. And I had actually bought some. You can actually buy it through the internet.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
But then after I read, wow, I probably really should have an experienced shaman.
Probably should. I would recommend it.
And I also realized that I was missing the one ingredient that you mix with the ayahuasca. I forget what it was.
Okay.
But it was a combination. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And so I thought, so I just ended up tossing it in the trash. It was actually pretty cheap.
Okay.
But I always wanted to go and
well, we can hook you up.
one of those ayahuasca journeys.
Yeah, we can hook you up here in the UK, or if you ever come back. It's definitely an interesting time. There's a whole kind of a fast associated with it, or a diet for the week before. But to be honest with you, Steve, I think the diet is to get people thinking and mentally prepared for the ceremony itself. Since as humans in the Western world, we never think about our diet. We just try to pile this in, and it's just for our sensory,
Was it a good experience for you?
It was a great experience. The discipline of the diet was a great way just to kind of, it was kind of like a semi-fast, as in I couldn't have all of these things I normally was. I was denying them for myself. I was thinking about why I was doing it. I was thinking about my upcoming ceremony and an experience I was going to have that I wasn't going to be in control. So that was important. And then I left a lot of things out of my diet when I came back.
Did you get the extreme nauseousness that a lot of people experience?
Yeah, it's pretty standard.
It's no big deal.
A few people don't have it, but you're ingesting this thing that's basically going to come back out of you. So yeah, I got it. A few people don't, but most people do have the nauseousness, and I think it's kind of an important part of the ceremony. I think it also keeps the.
It's like a purge, almost like a symbolic purge.
It is.
Like you're purging the spirit, but you're also.
Yeah.
You're getting this purge of the body.
Yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't bother me, but I was just curious if you're one of the guys.
I got it. Yeah, and some people take it further than the symbolism and say you're purging up. The shamans will say you're purging up a lot of bad things in your system, and I don't know. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's not. But yeah, and then I think also it keeps out the tourists, because if you're going to go in for something that's going to be physically demanding and uncomfortable, then you're submitting yourself to go through something painful to get to a higher level.
Well, there would be no discipline to it,
yeah.
And there would be virtually no benefit if it was easy. I mean,
yeah, but
nothing worthwhile is ever easy.
And that is true. And it's a little tough on the stomach, but I recommend it. So maybe it's something to do. I always ask people a few questions at the end, and I'm going to hit you with a few of those, Steve.
Sure.
I usually ask if you could make a phone call to the 20-year-old Steve Maxwell and give that young man a bit of advice. What would you tell him to do, or what advice would you give him?
Don't be afraid. There's nothing to fear. Fear is a fraud. Fear is a lie. You manufacture fear. There's absolutely nothing to be afraid of at all. And the other thing I tell them is follow your passion. The money will be there. You know, if you do what you love to do to the best of your ability, you'll always be able to make a living.
That's good advice. On that same note, if you could give the same some advice to the 40-year-old Stephen Maxwell, would that be different advice?
A little bit, maybe a little bit different. At that point, the 40-year-old Steve Maxwell was just beginning a marriage with a new baby son, had just bought a new home. I would say, don't take any of these things seriously, Steve. Nothing lasts forever. And, you know, you cannot take these things seriously. Enjoy them and have them, but don't become attached. Stop with all the attachments. At that point in my life, I was becoming a little bit too materialistically attached, and was starting to kind of collect material things. Became a bit of a collector.
Okay, a material or a collector of people as well? With
Well,
family members and
everything. You
kids?
know, it all just kind of, you know, was coming on me at that time. But yeah, I was pretty much involved in materialism at that time. Consumerism and so forth. You know,
Okay.
house, car, TV, you know, exercise equipment. I mean, it was just, you know, on and on and on, just buying stuff all the time, you know, collecting, adding to, and it was totally unnecessary.
I find that hard
I
to
didn't
believe.
need to do that.
Well, you've pretty much reversed that, I think.
Yeah, I certainly reversed the trend.
On the same note, what's the best advice you've ever received?
Well, one of the things I would have said to myself, and that was just follow your passion. Find what it is you really love to do and just do it. And don't worry about, you know, the future, the consequences and all that kind of stuff, because everything will play out in the right way. I don't plan for anything. I don't have any insurance. I don't plan for anything because I just always have faith that the higher self will guide me to do exactly the right thing at the right time. It's never failed me yet in the 61 years I've been on planet Earth.
I always think about this, Steve, because every time I try to play something safe, then if I do play it safe, I'm always like, well, wait a second. All my learning experiences in my life came from these traumatic events where I didn't play it safe, or something went wrong, and then I went through this growth pattern and went along this way that was good. So,
well, the biggest fear all humans have is the fear of death. And while I wouldn't care to die now, I don't have the fear of death anymore.
when did that stop?
It was about 10 years ago.
And you just moved past it?
Yeah, I just moved past it.
Okay.
Because it's going to happen whether you want it to or not. And there's no sense kicking and screaming and being afraid of it. It will happen when it happens, when it's supposed to happen, exactly the way it should happen. No sense being overly concerned about it. And I do have a belief in a much higher power than myself. And I it's all part of the cycle of life. So
good advice. To the 20-year-old out there listening to us, last part here, what advice would you give to them? Maybe they're just starting off to train, or maybe they want to become a fighter. What would you tell them?
Well, from that point of view, don't overtrain. Give yourself rest. Don't smash yourself hard every day. Now, you only need to train really hard like twice a week. That's more than enough. Wow. Doing more so, you're just going to really limit yourself as far as your recovery, and you actually retard your progress more than if you try to work hard every single day. Don't fall for that. And enjoy the process. Don't be in such a rush to get belts or promotions or this or that. Enjoy it for the sake of doing it. Just the sheer joy of the activity itself. To be with your friends, to have a friendly role. And, enjoy those days because you're probably near your physical peak. Man, enjoy that body that God gave you and really have fun with it. Too many guys, they're so intense.
Yeah, I'm sure you were. I was.
Oh, my God. But, you just enjoy the process. Have a little fun. And don't be so hard on yourself. A lot of these young guys are just beating up on themselves all the time. They've had mothers or fathers or teachers, put voices in their head. So they're constantly beating up on themselves about this or that or the other thing. The other thing I would say is that you have nothing to prove. You don't have to prove anything. You truly don't. This whole idea that you have to prove yourself is a false trap. Do things because you love it, because you enjoy it. Do it to the best of your ability, and don't feel like there's anything to prove. All you have to do is just be happy with yourself, and prove to yourself maybe
Right.
But you don't owe anybody anything in this world. And boy, I wish I would have known that too.
It's good advice.
Back
man.
in the day,
It's
man.
good advice. Yeah, nothing to prove in the mat.
Yeah.
Nothing to prove in the gym. Any of that stuff.
No, there's nothing.
Where are you for the next year? And if people want to find out more about you or have some seminars with you, how do they find out?
Well, they can always go to my website. It's maxwellsc.com. Maxwellsc.com.
Okay.
SC stands for Strength and Conditioning.
Okay.
There's a contact form on there, so they can contact me if they wish. Anyone out there that would like to host me for any type of workshop or seminar or even a certification, I'd be happy to talk to you about that. As far as where I'm going to be, man, from here it's to San Antonio, Texas, then to Las Vegas, Nevada, to LA. I may be on Joe's show again.
Okay. You were on 2 recently.
Yeah,
right?
on
Like
2.
back.
Yeah, man, I had a blast. He's such an interesting guy. And then Honolulu, Hawaii.
Okay.
And then I'm going
Why
to
there?
Oslo, Norway.
Okay.
Just because I used an astrologer.
Okay.
And who was an amazing guy. He used to be in academia.
Okay.
His name is Robert Tkach. If you wanted to check out an amazing guy, go to starcenter.com. This guy has never been off. Anytime I've ever gone against his advice, it's never worked out.
Wow.
This guy knows me.
And he gives you astrological advice based on you when you were born, that kind of thing?
Yes, but based on current charts.
Okay.
And it's like quantum physics, right? If you change your mind about something, sometimes the chart will actually change in front of him. Yeah.
And he gives you advice on where to go.
Heavy
what to
duty.
do.
Yeah,
It's
where
heavy
to
duty.
go. I usually ask his advice on, certain decisions, like important decisions,
Okay.
or even what should I be looking out for. Let's say I do a seminar. Any words of wisdom? Do you see anything coming up on the chart that I might want to be aware of or look out for? And he's just uncanny with his accuracy. Robert Tkach, Star Center.
How long have you been seeing him for?
Oh, since 2005, I think.
Okay.
I've been using this guy's services. And believe me, I wouldn't pay someone if it wasn't working out.
I believe you. I believe you.
And after Norway, man, my God, I'm going to be down in Taipei. I'm going to be in Shanghai. I'm going to be up in Singapore, possibly Hong Kong, down in Sydney, Australia again with my boys down there. I love Sydney, another great city.
Yeah.
And just boom, 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 just all over the place.
Okay.
I have no idea where I'm going to winter this next year. Probably in Sydney again.
Okay. Yeah, you're lucky. Winter in London, stay away. You're on Twitter as well. People can follow you there.
Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Okay.
I post videos and my diet and exercises and little clips and cool pictures and stuff. So
Excellent. And people on your website, it actually shows where you are at the time. So if they go to your
does.
website, it says he's in London now. I thought that was a really cool feature. So excellent. Steve, thanks so much for the time.
Wow, I really appreciate you having me on the show. It was really fun.
There's so much more we could talk about. I know you can talk for hours, but I think we hit most of the major pieces. So
I think we covered a pretty big area. So
I think we got to say, if you're listening to us on iTunes, you can see our beautiful faces. You can see a fantastic looking Steve, and it gives us younger guys something to look forward to. When I get I'm 18 years behind you. So, but no, it's all really good advice. I'm thinking about everything you're saying while you're saying it, and whether it's my goals or doing something you love, and not to be afraid. I think a lot of us in the Western world are constantly afraid of the next paycheck, and it's pointless, I guess, being scared of your life ending for 60 years and then it just is going to end one day. So
and anyway,
right. So you wasted a lot of time, didn't you?
It wasn't always, but for sure it was a predominant problem. So, it's nothing to fear. It's just a lie.
Good.
You might as well just enjoy the ride, man.
Right. As we say on this show, it's about the journey. Wish you well on yours, Steve. Thanks so much, and
Thank
all the
you.
best.
What we call reality is in fact nothing more than a culturally sanctioned and linguistically reinforced hallucination.
This week on London Real, we have movement artist Ido Portal.
So people think it's about handstands and, jumping on the rings and doing flips or whatever, when actually our work is way, way beyond that. It's a completely different and a huge paradigm shift in the way that you think about your practice and your movement and your body. We all have a body and we all move. We have no choice. The only question is how well are you doing it? And most people just don't have the user manual for their own machinery. Changing your dogma takes guts. I don't believe in planning. I believe in reacting. I'm not a messiah. I'm a thinker. I'm a teacher. I'm a mover. I'm being Ido. I'm just trying to handle myself in that way and be genuine.
On Sunday, London Real presents Ido Portal. Just move.
Walk beside me. Don't walk behind me.